going to be working on our hatching, cross-hatching, and stippling ink projects today. So you're going to need a pencil, your finest tipped Sharpie that's in your kit, or a micro pen if you happen to have one. Also a regular black pen will work, especially if you have free-flowing ink within that. You're also going to need a sheet of drawing paper. For this project, because it takes so long, we are not going to use a whole sheet of paper, so you may fold that paper in half, line up your corners and the edge of your paper before you crease it, and then run your crease up and down. You can be working on this vertically if your image is vertical, or horizontal if you're working from a horizontal image for this project. That's going to depend on what photo you picked as your reference piece. For my reference photo, I'm going to be using a picture of my dog Chase that I happen to have on my computer that I'm going to be looking at while I sketch in pencil. I want to sketch very lightly in pencil first though, because when I'm finished, I'm going to be erasing that pencil. I don't want it to show up, and my image of Chase happens to be vertical. So when I'm looking between the two, I want to look at where does he start and stop compared to the edge of the picture that I'm looking at for my reference, right? So if I take a look at his ear, it's sort of a triangle shape, and I always start out very general. I don't get super specific right off the bat because I know things are going to change. I do very gentle sketching of the general shapes of things. And then I'll go back in and I'll fix angles later as I'm going through. He has a lot of fur on him. So again, and his other ear is clicked over the other way, so I can't see it. And for his particular ear type, he has a folded ear, which is difficult to see in the picture, but it's more like that. So I can always go back in again. I'm drawing nice and light so that I can go back in and fix any issues while I'm drawing. Once I have my basic shapes in, then I can go in and I can start really defining things. You'll notice as I go through, I make a lot of changes and I do some erasing along the way. That's why we work in pencil first. Occasionally in areas where I think I might have trouble shading with my hatching, cross-hatching, or stippling, or pointillism, I go ahead and I shade with my pencil just to remind myself how dark and how light some of those areas should be. But I'm not doing the entire thing shaded in because sometimes the pencil or the graphite can prevent the ink from sticking to the paper. I also put in a few of the background items so it's not too plain and boring back there, but I want to keep it general and the focus on the dog. As you start working with your micro pen or your finest point Sharpie, you want to pick if you want hatching, cross-hatching, or stippling, or pointillism that is. I'm going to pick hatching because dog hairs are naturally straight on my particular dog. If you have a curly-haired dog, you could also do hatching / cross-hatching for that, but working with the straight lines on my dog is going to be a lot easier. I like to start with my darkest areas first and then work my way lighter. I have some white areas that will also still need to have some lines to indicate the fur, but not nearly as many. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start doing those darker areas, and they have shorter hair up near the muzzle, longer hair further away. So I'm going to adjust my lines accordingly, and I'm going to try and keep them in the direction that the fur is falling or following. So it has some movement when you look at the fur of your animal and they go a particular direction. Usually it follows the body shape. So you want to keep your lines moving in those same shapes. Don't let them go all horizontal if there's nothing horizontal in your animal fur. If you're doing something that has small feathering, this works well. If you're doing things with scales, you want to be looking at doing some of that pointillism, the dots or the stippling in those, as opposed to hatching or cross-hatching. Remember, each of those scales overlaps, so you'll have to have a little bit of shading on scales if you're working in scales. Underneath his chin, he has white, but I can't leave it plain white because otherwise I wouldn't know if there's a shadow there or not to make it look realistic and rounded. There's an underside there to his chin. So I put some lighter strokes or some strokes that are further apart from one another. You might also work with different size Sharpies. You have a really tiny one and a medium one. You could switch between the two to help you out with this process as well. I just go back in and I overlap areas very heavily. Sometimes those lines are even touching or overlapping. but still going the same direction. I'm not changing direction with them for this hatching. And then I do them further apart for the areas that I need to look gray, or in some instances on my picture, my dog is tan. So some of those areas, those lines move further apart from one another as well to indicate that it's tan and not black. For my black areas, we'll see I go back over them multiple times to really make sure that they get dark, whereas opposed to the tan areas in between the black and the white only get open areas. Again, following the same shape as the dog and where the fur would go, super important. I'm going to stipple in around his nose because those shadows get really well defined. And to help his ear show up more, I make sure that fur is going a different direction because it is going a different direction on the ear. And then I finish out by adding in some of the background shapes. Once I'm finished, then I'm going to go back through. I'm going to take my eraser. I'm going to take out all of my pencil lines, leaving behind just the ink lines. And then I can go back in and add to anything that I think needs a little bit more darkening up.